All right, guys, how's it going out here? Fishing California with EBA. Today we're talking all about fishing rods and equipment, but today we're going to focus on the NRX, the NRX Plus, and we're going to really break down this rod. Specifically, we're going to focus on one rod model today. That's going to be the 903C MBR. And the 904C MBR. Now, both of these are casting rods. The 3 and the 4 represent the power. 90 represents how many inches it is. So it's a 7.5-foot rod, 90 inches, a 3 power, 903, and 7.5 feet, 90 inches with a 4 power for the 904. We're going to break down these rods, what these rods do well, what they don't do well, some of the things that I am impressed with, some of the techniques I love using, some of the things that it doesn't work well for. We're going to do all that and more today. We're going to talk about price, policy, warranty, if it breaks, the steps and procedures to take. Things have changed recently with Shimano and G Loomis, so we're going to break down that. Let's talk about it. The 903, let's start there. 7.5 feet, 90 inches, like we talked about. It's a 3-power rod. It's really a phenomenal rod. A 1/4 ounce to a 3/4 ounce rating allows you to throw a lot of different weight classes on this same rod. The NRX original rods were a little bit more parabolic, softer, and had more load to them. The newer NRX Plus models, they're a little bit thinner and lighter by a hair, but thinner in the blank diameter, but they have a wrap around it, which makes that action just slightly tighter, slightly stiffer. But the MBR, this version of the rod does have some extra flex, so it is a casting rod, but it does have features of parabolic features and some load and give to this rod, which we're going to talk about here. So it makes it an exceptional rod for just casting and cranking. If you like crankbait fishing, this is a darn good rod. It's gonna cast the crankbait out far. It's gonna do the work and really absorb a lot of that crankbait, a lot of the the stress, the fatigue that you get when you crank a crankbait, especially when you get to a mid diving or a deep diving crankbait. This rod's going to flex. It's going to take a lot of that stress and fatigue off of you, allowing you to cast and crank a lot quicker, easier, and just stay fresh. So if you're casting and winding a spinnerbait, a crankbait, a buzzbait, a chatterbait, anything that's going to essentially bounce around a little bit or shimmy or something that like I said is going to inevitably fatigue you. This rod throws it with ease. You can throw it a country mile, but you can also just you can fish whatever you're fishing all day long with almost no fatigue. Here's where it gets a bit more interesting. The rod does have the ability to throw topwater baits and things of that nature. It does have the ability to throw frogs, actually, and things of that nature as well. It does have all those abilities. You want a whopper plopper, you want a pompadour, you want a crazy crawler, topwater action bait. That's going to work great. Let's say you are trying to, throw a wake bait. A wake bait's a great bait to throw on this rod. It's going to sit on top of the water and it's going to go back and forth. That rod's going to very, very, like I said, it's got a great parabolic features and it loads well. So the wake bait works perfect on this rod with a slow gear ratio. I like the 5 gear ratio on a wake bait, but you're going to go as slow as you can and you're just going to let the rod and the lure do the work for you. When you're using all these techniques and you want to talk about open hook baits, you want to talk about throwing a worm out there with an open hook, you want to talk about throwing, a drop shot or you know, you can get away with that. It really is sensitive enough. So if you're throwing a jig and a pig and you've got weed guards, it's got the power, it's got the sensitivity, and you're going to be just fine throwing a jig and a pig at 3/4 of an ounce and then throwing a whopper plopper at 3/4 of an ounce. I mean, obviously, you're going to make sure you want to have the monofilament, top water line, or braid for the top water applications, and you're going to want to make sure you have fluorocarbon and such for the other applications. But the rod really is almost a do-all. The only little thing that this rod doesn't do well, in my opinion, you know, whether it's a weedless bait, whether it's an open hook bait, whether it's Texas rigged, or you know, you've got an exposed hook, or you've got a hook that's, you know, embedded within the plastic. Whatever the situation is, this rod works. But the two situations where this rod really, we'll talk about three. One, if you're trying to skip something under a dock, this rod is not really good. If you're trying to skip a bait under a dock, it doesn't work very well. If you're trying to work a jerk bait, it's just a little bit too long. And if you're trying to work a top water side to side, it becomes a little bit difficult. So those three techniques are where it doesn't shine, and everything else it really does. If you like spoon fishing or hair jigs or anything of that nature, this is also a phenomenal rod. I mean, it's just going to allow you to bomb it out there. It's going to allow, like I said, the rod to take a lot of that load when you're popping, yo-yoing, jigging it, whatever you want to call it. When you're spooning or you're hair jigging, it does require a lot of stress and a lot of, you know, jigging motions, sometimes aggressive, more aggressive, less aggressive, depending on time of year, temperature of the water. But your rod, this is one of those rods where you can almost do anything except, you know, you can have this rod and say a side rod for skipping, and for top water, small top water, like, you know, walk the dog baits, and for say a jerk bait or something like that, and that'll cover those applications with that shorter rod. So like I said, this rod's incredible. It's a medium heavy. It really is, like, it's a great rod. It's very popular, the 3 power, one of the more popular models for all the different series on the NRX. But we're going to talk a little bit now about the 904C MBR. That rod is a classic as well. Same type of rod. This is going to be a 3/8 to a 1 ounce though. So 3/8 of an ounce to a 1 ounce lure rating. These rods do have the capacity, the ability, because they have that wrap, to go a little bit heavier. So if you got a 1 and a 1/8 or a 1 and a 3/8, you can get away on that 4 power. And on the 3 power, you can go a little bit heavier and do a 7/8 ounce on that, and you can get away with it. They're made well, they're strong, they've got, you know, quality equipment, guides, etc. So their craftsmanship is really unbeatable almost. But what the 904 does that the 903 doesn't is, you know, it really just allows you to handle a bigger class of baits. It allows you to handle bigger class of fish. So, you know, if you're doing saltwater, or if you're in the striper game and, you know, you do hook up into 20 to 40 pound stripers or fish of that caliber, on some type of, you know, regularity or irrate, doesn't matter. I mean, if you catch a 20-pound striper and you miss it because you got the wrong rod and it overpowered you, and, you know, it took you on a run and then it spit it out, or if, you know, you got the right rod with the right action, the right power, you're able to get that 20 to 40 pounder in. The 903, I think, is fully capable of getting a lot of these bigger fish in. But once you really start talking about, let's say 20, 25 pounds and bigger, the 904 really gives you an advantage when you get those bigger fish, those bigger class fish. When you have a bigger bait, bigger class bait, it really works in that regard. But they're really the same rod in a lot of ways, just different weight classes, different weight class of bait for the fish. But they're really the same rod. They have the same advantages, the same disadvantages in a way. Like, so the techniques I talked about with the 903 are going to apply to the 904. And the things that the 903 doesn't do well, like we talked about, top water, jerk bait, and skipping, like a flip, where you, I mean, a skip where you're kind of side arming and trying to skip something under a dock or under some type of structure, it doesn't do that well, but it does everything else well. I would say one of my favorite casting rods ever, bar none, hands down. Just love this rod, love the 903, love the 904. You know, the next time we're going to break down some of the conquest models. But right now, we're going to talk a little bit about the policies, how they've changed, the return, the warranty, things of that nature. We're going to talk about those. Those are different as well. So G Loomis and Shimano recently had a fraud epidemic where guides in Texas were essentially collectively committing fraud against the company. They lost millions of dollars straight from the horse's mouth at Shimano, my insider. We got that information. The fact that it hasn't been, talked about by any big channels or by media just shows you how much suppression there is with this topic. But they did almost, they upped the prices of replacing rods, and they upped a lot of the prices on everything. The rods, the replacement cost of the rods, and things of that nature. They changed their policy for how you send it in, so now it's not free. You have to pay for it to be sent in. And it's a bit more of a hassle. I love the rods though, but man, I mean, because of some bass fishing guides in Texas that collectively committed fraud on a mass scale against Shimano and G Loomis, now we're all forced to pay for their fraud. It's terrible. It's life. And, it should be talked about more, considering we're talking about like the biggest company in fishing for bass and other, types of species of fish in the world. And, massive fraud committed, it's, sad to see, sad to see. And unfortunately, by the guides in Texas, bass fishing guides and all this, and you're like, man, you guys are supposed to have more credibility than that. You guys are supposed to be the ambassadors of the sport in a way, and, not doing great things, obviously. There's great guides in Texas, but apparently there's also a bunch of them that are not good people. So, we've talked about this. These rods are incredible. They're light. They're sensitive enough. They've got a lot of the right features to do most applications. And I hope you guys check them out. You get yourself one. I hope you enjoy the video. Smash that like, subscribe button if you haven't. Throw a comment. If you have any questions, don't be afraid. Just ask me. I will have an answer. If I don't have an answer, I'll very clearly say I don't have an answer for that. But it's rare I don't have something to say about it, because I've spent most of my life surrounded by this particular thing that I love called fishing. So stay tuned, guys. Appreciate you.